The sun hovered low over Dust Valley, bleeding rust-colored light across the parched ridgelines. Elena Marrow, 30 years old, sharp-eyed, and always walking like she carried a secret inside her ribs, stood on the warped porch of her stepfather's ranch house. She could feel the boards trembling beneath her boots, or maybe that trembling came from within her. Behind her, the door creaked open. "Don't make me drag you," her stepfather, Harlan Pike, growled. His voice carried the weight of a man who believed the world owed him obedience. "Today's the day, Elena. There ain't no changing it." She didn't turn to face him. The horizon held her attention, endless, empty, and silent, except for a dust devil spinning lazily over the barren flats. Anything was better than looking at Harlan. "You're marrying him," he said, stepping out onto the porch. "Valkho Ironcrest is riding here before sundown. If you don't say yes, I'll lose everything. Land, herd, reputation. You'll be the reason this ranch collapses." Elena's fingers curled into her skirt. She remembered the rumors that drifted around saloons like drifting smoke. Valkho Ironcrest, the most feared Apache warrior in the region. A man who fought like he carried storms under his skin. A man people claimed could read your soul through your eyes. A man no one crossed. "I'm not property you can trade away," Elena muttered, still watching the horizon. Harlan scoffed. "Everyone's something to trade. You more than most." The screen door slapped behind him as he walked inside, muttering harshly. Elena released a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, long and trembling. She pressed her palm against her chest right above the place where her real secret lived. Not one soul in Dust Valley knew what she was hiding. Not Harlan. Not the ranch hands. Not the preacher who always said she had sinful shadows behind her eyes. No one knew what she carried in her heart, and tonight, she feared Valkho Ironcrest might be the one man who could. The wind shifted. Hoofbeats echoed across the flatlands, slow, heavy, unhurried. Elena turned, her pulse quickening. A single rider approached from the south, cutting through the crimson haze like a moving shadow sculpted by firelight. He dismounted before reaching the porch. Tall and broad-shouldered, with long obsidian hair braided with bone and silver, and a scar running from his jaw to the collarbone that spoke of battles no ordinary man survived. His presence radiated a kind of silent force, the kind that turned the air thick around him. Harlan practically ran out of the house. "Chief Ironcrest," he said, trembling slightly despite his efforts to sound bold. "An honor." "As agreed, she's ready." Elena stiffened, but Valkho's eyes, dark, steady, unreadable, shifted directly to hers. He didn't look at her like a bargain. He looked at her like he was. Assessing a storm dot after a long moment, he spoke. His voice was calm, low, and carried a cadence unfamiliar to the townfolk. "Do you agree to this union, Elena Marrow?" It wasn't the cold demand she expected. It was a question. Harlan scowled and hissed, "Answer him, now." Elena stepped off the porch and walked toward Valkho until only 2 feet separated them. His height forced her to tilt her chin upward, but she refused to appear small. "I don't agree," she whispered, "but I don't have the power to refuse it." Valkho's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in something like curiosity. He shifted his gaze toward Harlan. "You told me the woman accepted." Harlan wet his lips. "She will accept. She's just stubborn." The Apache warrior's jaw flexed. "I do not take unwilling wives." The silence that followed was heavy, crackling like a fuse. Harlan lunged forward. "You will take her. We have a deal." Before he could touch her, Valkho moved fast, controlled, dangerous. His hand caught Harlan's wrist midair with a force that halted him completely. "You do not decide for her," Valkho said. Elena's breath stilled. "No one had ever spoken in her defense before, not like this." Valkho released Harlan and turned back to her. "If you marry me, Elena, you do so because you choose it. If you do not, I ride away." She swallowed. "And if I choose nothing?" "Then your heart will choose for you." Valkho murmured. Her heart, her secret thundered. Inside her chest, Harlan glared at her with a warning that promised violence later, and Elena realized something terrifying. For the first time in her entire life, she wanted to choose. Night crept over Dust Valley like a slow spill of ink, swallowing the last traces of sunset. The ranch house lamps flickered against the dark, casting thin yellow arcs onto the porch. Elena Marrow stood at the edge of the yard, far from the house, staring at the line where land met shadow. Behind her, the argument between Valkho Ironcrest and her stepfather still echoed in her bones. She had expected Valkho to be brutal, domineering, exactly the kind of man Harlan wanted to tether her to. But the warrior's refusal to take a wife by force that unsettled her more than if he dragged her off on horseback. Mercy was harder to predict than cruelty. Mercy required intention. And men with intentions were dangerous. Bootsteps approached from behind. She didn't turn. She knew it wasn't Harlan. He stomped like someone who hated the ground. These steps were silent but weighted, as if the walker moved with purpose rather than anger. "Elena Marrow," Valkho's voice murmured, his tone low and rough like stone under river water. She stiffened but did not face him. The night breeze carried the scent of sage and smoke from his clothing. That scent reminded her she was dealing with a man raised under different laws, different skies. "You walked away during our talk," Valkho continued. "I followed because you left without answers." She crossed her arms. "I didn't leave. I escaped the shouting. I was not shouting." "No," she replied, a humorless laugh escaping. "Only Harlan does that." Valkho stepped beside her, looking out across the darkened valley. The moon was only a thin silver knife above them. "You fear your stepfather." "I fear what he'll do if I refuse him," she said quietly. "He's the one man in this world who should protect me, and he'd sell me like cattle." He studied her profile with a calm intensity that made her pulse skitter. "I have known men like him," he said. "Men who pretend strength, but their power comes only from binding others." His hands stayed at his sides open, non-threatening. "In my people's ways, a woman chooses her path, even if that path leads away from a warrior." Elena swallowed. "You don't know me." Valkho's eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. "I know what fear looks like, and what defiance looks like." They stood silently for several heartbeats, listening to the distant howl of a coyote. Finally, Elena spoke. "You ask me to choose, but you don't understand. Choosing anything feels impossible. My entire life has been surviving decisions made by men." "I am not asking you to choose me," Valkho said. "I am asking you to choose yourself." That statement cut deeper than he probably intended. Her breath hitched. No one had ever phrased it like that. Valkho looked at her then. "If you come with me, I will protect you from him. If you stay, you do so of your own will, and still, I will leave you in peace." His voice softened. "But I must know your truth." Elena turned fully to him, the wind pushing a strand of hair across her cheek. "My truth?" She echoed, heart pounding painfully. "Yes," Valkho said. "Why does your heart beat like a hunted thing? What is it you are hiding?" Her chest tightened. He sees it. He senses it. The secret she carried, the one she'd buried beneath years of silence, fluttered inside her like a trapped bird. "I can't tell you," she whispered. He didn't step closer. He simply asked, "Are you in danger?" "Yes," she admitted, voice trembling. "But not in the way you think." "Then tell me how." She stared at his face, strong yet unexpectedly gentle in the moonlight. His patience unnerved her. His presence steadied and shook her at the same time. "If I tell you," she said slowly, "you'll look at me differently." Maybe you won't want this union anymore. Your stepfather wants the union, Valkho corrected. I want the truth. Before she could form a reply, the ranch door slammed open. Harlan's silhouette filled the doorway, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. Elena! Get inside, now. She instinctively flinched. Valkho's eyes darkened with a quiet warning. He does not command you. But Harlan's voice rose again. You hear me? Inside. Elena's breath came fast, panic tightening her throat, old scars tightening her spine. Valkho took one step forward, not toward her, but toward the house. If he lays a hand on you again, the warrior said, voice low and lethal, this valley will learn what true fear is. Elena's heart hammered. She had to choose. But choosing meant exposing the truth she'd hidden for years. The truth burning beneath her ribs, waiting to break free. Elena did not move at first. Harlan's barking orders echoed across the yard. But the sound no longer had the same grip on her spine, not with Valkho Ironcrest standing between her, and the doorway like a stone monument carved out of the night. Elena! Inside! Harlan shouted again, his voice cracking with drunken anger. Valkho didn't look at her stepfather. His dark gaze remained on Elena, soft enough to coax, strong enough to anchor. If you go in now, you go in as his property, he said. If you stay as a woman choosing her own path. She swallowed hard. Years of fear pressed at her lungs. Fear of Harlan, fear of losing the ranch she'd worked, fear of the world beyond Dust Valley. But deeper than fear was the secret she held, a secret that pulsed now like a heartbeat against her ribs. Elena! Harlan's boots thundered down the porch steps. Valkho finally turned his head, not quickly. Not aggressively, just enough to make Harlan stop mid-stride. Do not touch her, Valkho said, the words low but delivered with a gravity that made the wind itself pause. Your threats end tonight. Harlan faltered. The bottle in his hand trembled. He'd probably seen plenty of men in saloon fights, injured ranch hands, bounty hunters passing through town, but he'd never looked into the eyes of a man like Valkho Ironcrest. A man who radiated a quiet, deadly certainty. You think you can come here and take what's mine? Harlan sputtered. She is not yours, Valkho replied. Elena felt the air shift. She stepped forward, placing herself between them. Stop, she whispered, her voice breaking despite her resolve. This is my choice, mine. Harlan's face contorted. Your choice? Don't be foolish, girl. You need this ranch. You need my name. No, she said, pulse pounding. I need freedom. Valkho watched her, not interfering, not pressuring, just seeing her. Really seeing her. Harlan pointed the bottle at her like a weapon. If you don't come inside right now, Elena, you'll what? She challenged. Beat me? Starve me? Lock me up like you've done before? His jaw twitched. He hadn't expected her to speak it aloud. She'd never dared before. Valkho's stance changed. Not aggressive, just braced, alert. Harlan lifted the bottle as if to strike. Valkho moved, and though he didn't strike Harlan, his hand snapped forward and caught the bottle mid-air. Glass cracked in his palm, shards reflecting the moonlight. The force of the catch made Harlan stumble backward, falling onto the dirt like a man who'd been stripped of every lie he'd built himself. On. The bottle fragments dropped at Valkho's feet. You will not harm her. Again, the warrior said. The silence that followed was suffocating. Harlan scrambled backward on his hands like a frightened animal. His voice shrank to a thin rasp. She ain't worth this trouble. She ain't worth anything. Elena flinched at the words because they weren't new, because they had shaped her entire life. Valkho exhaled slowly. He has taught you lies, he said to her, not breaking eye contact. And you have carried them too long. Her throat tightened. You don't know what I've carried." "Then tell me," he said gently. Harlan got up and staggered back toward the porch, muttering curses, defeated but not harmless. He slammed the door behind him. The household fell silent again. Elena stepped away, heading toward the open field. Valkho followed but kept a respectful distance 3 paces, no more. She stopped where the dry grass brushed her boots, staring into the moonlit valley. Breath shaking, she pressed a hand to the spot over her heart. "There's a reason he wants me married off," she said, voice thin. "It's not just the land or the bargain. It's what he's afraid I'll say." Valkho waited. Elena closed her eyes. "My mother didn't die in a fever," she whispered. "She didn't fall from a horse. Harlan killed her. And I've carried that truth alone for years." The wind lifted her hair. Valkho's expression didn't change, but something ancient and dangerous flickered behind his eyes. "Does anyone else know?" "No," she whispered. "And that's not my only secret." He stepped closer, not touching, not pushing, just close enough that she felt less alone. "I will hear it when you are ready." She shook her head. "If I tell you everything, you may walk away." "I will not walk away from truth," he said softly. "Only from lies." Her heart thudded painfully, echoing the secret she still held. A secret darker than Harlan's crime. A secret that could change everything. And tonight, for the first time, she feared Valkho Ironcrest might be the only man strong enough or dangerous enough to face it. The desert sky blushed with the last light of the setting sun as Elena Marrow rode along the jagged ridge overlooking the canyon. Her horse, a dark bay mare named Whisper, moved with the grace of shadows, her hooves stirring up dust that caught the dying light. Elena's chest felt tight, a mix of dread and defiance warring within her. She had spent days hiding in the canyon's folds, evading the eyes of men who would see her fate decided by her stepfather's greed. And yet, the thought of Valkho Ironcrest, the feared Apache warrior she was meant to marry, gnawed at her mind like a persistent flame. She remembered their first encounter in the settlement. Valkho had emerged from the desert like a storm incarnate, muscular, shirtless, with long black hair falling over his broad shoulders, tribal jewelry glinting with each movement. His eyes, dark and piercing, had scrutinized her not as a stranger, but as if he could see into the deepest chambers of her soul. The entire town had whispered about him, the warrior who could silence a dozen men with a glance. Yet she had sensed something else behind that fierce mask, something untamed. Yes, but honest. Now, with the canyon stretching before her like a natural fortress, Elena slowed Whisper. She dismounted, her boots sinking into the hot sand, and let the silence envelop her. She had learned quickly that the wilderness had its own laws, indifferent and unforgiving, yet strangely protective. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, remembering the secret she had carried all these years, a heart that no one could touch. A fire of her own making, forged in solitude and tempered by betrayal. A rustle behind the rocks caught her attention. Her hand instinctively went to the dagger strapped to her thigh. But it was him, Valkho Ironcrest. He emerged like a shadow blending into the dusk, his powerful frame outlined against the burning horizon. His gaze softened slightly as he studied her. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said. His voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the canyon walls. "I have no choice," Elena replied. Her voice steady despite the quiver of tension in her chest. "I won't go back to that life." "Not yet." Valkho studied her, his eyes flicking to the dagger and the way her body tensed for fight or flight. There was a respect there, the acknowledgement of her strength, even as he was bound by the traditions of his own people. Slowly, he took a step closer, his bare feet silent on the sand. "You carry more than fear," he said. "I see it in your eyes. You have secrets, Elena Marrow. Secrets worth protecting, but also worth sharing." Elena's breath caught. How could he see her so clearly? She had learned to hide her heart, to mask her feelings even from herself. And yet, something about Valkho made that impossible. She had to keep moving, to stay ahead of the chains of her past. I am not yours to command. Valkho, she said finally, a spark of defiance igniting her voice. No one owns me, not even my stepfather. He smiled faintly, a hint of admiration breaking through his hardened exterior. Good, he said, because I never wanted to own you. Only to stand by your side, if you let me. The desert is cruel, and so are the men who think they can control what they do not understand. A sudden cry echoed from the canyon's mouth, a warning. Elena's heart leapt into her throat as she realized the men sent by her stepfather had tracked her. She spun Whisper around and mounted quickly, her hands gripping the reins. Valkho was already moving, his presence commanding, a whirlwind of strength and precision. He leapt onto his horse, muscles rippling under the fading sun, his long hair whipping in the wind. Hold on, he called, and Elena did, gripping the saddle as they surged down the canyon together, dust and shadow swirling around them. She could feel his energy, a mixture of raw power and controlled fury, shielding her in a way words could never explain. As they rode, the canyon walls echoing with the hooves pounding, Elena realized something profound. Her heart, though hidden, was not immune. Valkho Ironcrest was not just a warrior sent to claim her. He was a force that could awaken what she had spent her life guarding. And as night fell and the stars began to pierce the desert sky, she understood that the journey ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand truth, revelation, and the surrender of a heart she had kept locked for too long. For the first time in years, Elena Marrow allowed herself a flicker of hope. The moon hung low over the canyon, a silver sentinel watching the desert below. Elena Marrow sat by the fire, the warmth doing little to chase the chill from her bones. Whisper, her mare, grazed quietly nearby, while Valkho Ironcrest stood at the canyon's edge, his silhouette carved sharply against the pale light. His eyes scanned the horizon endlessly, every shadow, every whisper of wind making him alert. Even in the night, he radiated a fierce presence, the kind that could intimidate armies yet remain gentle for those he chose to protect. Elena stirred the embers with a stick, her thoughts drifting like smoke in the night. She had been running from her stepfather for weeks now, hiding in canyons and abandoned homesteads, but the dread of returning to that forced marriage gnawed at her. Yet beneath the fear, a strange feeling grew of fragile trust in Valkho Ironcrest. It was dangerous, she knew. He was a warrior feared by many, a man whose reputation could silence a town with a glance. And still, she sensed he was not just a storm. He was a shield. Do you always ride alone through the canyon at night? Valkho's voice broke the silence, calm but carrying the weight of authority. I had no choice, Elena admitted, her eyes fixed on the fire. The men sent by my stepfather, they would take me back if I stayed anywhere near the settlement. He nodded, his gaze softening. You are strong, Elena, stronger than you know. And yet, there is more to you than the surface. I can see it. She flinched slightly. What do you mean? Your heart, he said simply. It hides, yes, but it burns. You are not just surviving, you are waiting for something worth fighting for. And I think I can help you find it. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had always believed her heart was untouchable, a fortress that no one could breach. And yet, Valkho's words stirred something long buried, a mixture of hope and fear. She looked away, forcing herself to speak before vulnerability could betray her. I can't let myself feel for anyone, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Not while I am bound by my stepfather's control. Valkho turned his attention back to the horizon, muscles tense even in the stillness. "The past is a shadow," he said. "It can follow you, haunt you, but it cannot define who you are unless you let it. You have a choice, Elena. Run, hide, or fight. But remember, fight wisely, and you may find freedom." Her chest tightened at his words, each one striking deep. She wanted to ask him more, to reach across the fire and touch the certainty she saw in his eyes. But the desert had a way of testing resolve, and tonight, that test came in the form of footsteps crunching against the gravel beyond the ridge. Elena froze. Valkho's stance shifted immediately, the calm warrior now a predator. The firelight flickered across his bare chest, illuminating every sinew and scar. In one fluid motion, he reached for his bow, arrows nocked and ready. "They found us," he murmured. Helena's heart raced. From the shadows, men emerged, rough-looking bounty hunters sent by her stepfather, eyes glinting with the promise of capture. But Valkho's presence was terrifying. In a display of controlled fury, he moved like a phantom, arrows flying with precision that made Elena gasp. Each arrow struck with purpose, forcing the men to retreat, their shouts echoing into the canyon's night. When the dust settled, Valkho approached her again. "Are you all right?" His voice was softer now, almost tender, but still firm, like steel wrapped in leather. I am," she whispered, though her hands trembled. The terror of the moment mixed with something else, something thrilling, dangerous, and entirely new. He extended a hand toward her, not just in protection, but in solidarity. "You do not have to face this alone, Elena, not ever again." For the first time, she allowed herself to meet his gaze fully, seeing not a fearsome warrior, but someone who understood her. Someone who could stand in the fire and shield her from a world that sought to control her dot as the moon climbed higher. Casting silver light over the canyon, Elena realized something she had long denied. Her heart, though hidden, was no longer hers alone to guard. It had begun to awaken, stirred by the presence of a man as fierce and loyal as Valkho Ironcrest. And in that awakening, a new path emerged, one where fear would no longer dictate her fate, and where even the most feared warrior could become her closest ally, and perhaps something more. The night stretched on, and the canyon held its secrets, but for Elena, the first flickers of hope had taken root. The sun had barely begun its climb over the jagged peaks of the desert when Elena Marrow awoke to the soft sounds of whisper pawing at the sand. The night's events still thrummed in her veins, the attack, the fear, and the undeniable presence of Valkho Ironcrest standing as her shield. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes, watching him as he moved silently across the ridge, scanning the horizon with the precision of a predator attuned to every detail. Even in the soft morning light, his muscles rippled with strength, his long black hair catching the wind like a dark banner of power. Elena felt a mix of awe and apprehension. She had spent her life hiding her heart, her true thoughts and desires. But Valkho, he had a way of seeing through the masks people wore, the lies they told themselves. She couldn't help but wonder if he understood the depths of her fear and the fire she kept hidden within. "You move like the desert," she said quietly, breaking the morning stillness. Silent, relentless, yet beautiful in its own danger. Valkho's eyes met hers, dark and piercing. For a moment, he said nothing, simply observing her as if weighing her words. Then he spoke, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the rocky canyon. "And you, Elena Marrow, are like the wind over these sands. Hard to catch, impossible to tame, yet impossible to ignore." She felt a shiver run through her. His words were no mere flattery, they held truth she couldn't deny. The tension between them was electric, a delicate thread stretched across danger and desire. But before she could respond, the harsh wind brought a warning scent: smoke. Valkho's posture shifted instantly. He mounted his horse with a fluidity that spoke of years in the desert, muscles taut and ready. Elena followed suit, heart hammering in her chest. From the distant ridge, flames curled into the sky. Another attack. Another threat from those who wanted to control her life. "Stay close," Valkho commanded, his voice both protective and unyielding. Elena nodded, gripping the reins as Whisper surged forward beside his powerful steed. The ride was brutal, the canyon a maze of shadows and dust. Arrows whistled past, some lodging in rocks near their path. Valkho moved with terrifying precision, deflecting threats with a bow and blade, a man perfectly attuned to the violence of the desert. Elena couldn't deny the thrill coursing through her veins, nor the fear. Every time she looked at him, she saw a warrior capable of defending her from the world, and a man capable of stirring emotions she had buried long ago. Finally, they reached a natural alcove carved into the canyon walls. The smoke from the pursuing men still lingered, but here they were safe for the moment. Valkho dismounted, his chest heaving slightly from exertion, and looked at her. "You fight well," he said, "but you cannot do it alone forever. You must trust someone, Elena. You must trust me." Elena swallowed hard, the truth of his words echoing in her heart. Trust was not something she had allowed herself in years, yet she felt the pull of it now. I want to," she admitted softly. "I don't know if I can, but I want to." Valkho stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet comforting. "Then you will," he said firmly. "We face this together. And when the dust settles, you will see the truth, not the chains of your stepfather, not the fears of the past, but the power of your own heart." Elena met his gaze, seeing not just the warrior feared by so many, but the man who had become her anchor. Her pulse raced, a mix of fear, exhilaration, and something deeper, something she could no longer deny. As the sun climbed higher, casting light across the canyon floor, Valkho reached for her hand. Tentatively, she allowed him to take it. The warmth of his touch was electrifying, a promise that whatever lay ahead, she would not face it alone. For the first time in her life, Elena Marrow felt the weight of her stepfather's threats lift, replaced by a fierce determination. With Valkho Ironcrest by her side, she was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. She was a force of her own making, and together, they would confront whatever darkness awaited on the edge of destiny. With hearts unshackled and spirits unyielding, the desert stretched endlessly before them, wild and untamed, yet somehow filled with possibility. And in that vast, unforgiving expanse, Elena allowed herself a single, fragile thought. Perhaps the warrior she had once feared could become the one who unlocked the heart she had kept hidden for so long. The canyon was silent except for the whisper of the wind through jagged rocks. Elena Marrow stood at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the settlement below. Smoke rose from chimneys and watchfires, but tonight it was different. Tonight, she felt no fear, only a fierce determination that had grown from weeks of running, hiding, and trusting Valkho Ironcrest. Valkho emerged from the shadows behind her, his silhouette lit by the silver glow of the moon. Muscles rippling, chest bare, long black hair brushing his shoulders, adorned with beaded necklaces and tribal jewelry, he looked every bit the legendary warrior the town whispered about. But Elena saw something else now, a protector, a man who had shared her struggles, faced the danger of the desert and men alike, and had never faltered in his loyalty. "They're expecting us," she said softly, her voice steady. Valkho's gaze swept across the settlement. "Let them come," he replied, his deep voice calm, yet laced with the lethal authority of a predator. "We are no longer the prey." Elena swallowed, her hand tightening on the bow she had carried alongside him these past days. Fear had been her constant companion for so long, but now it was tempered by courage and by the bond she had forged with Valkho. She could no longer deny what had bloomed in her heart, a fire she had kept hidden even from herself. Together, she said. Together, he echoed. They descended the cliff into the canyon below, moving with the precision of two shadows in perfect harmony. Every step, every glance was calculated. Valkho's presence was magnetic, commanding, but also grounding. Elena felt the weight of the past, the stepfather who had sought to bind her, the men who had hunted her, but for the first time, she knew they no longer controlled her fate. As they approached the town, a group of armed men appeared at the gates, weapons raised, but Valkho did not hesitate. He stepped forward, muscles taut, bow in hand, eyes locked on their adversaries. Elena followed his lead, releasing arrows with deadly accuracy. The men faltered, unsure how to face a warrior whose very presence seemed unstoppable. Valkho moved like a force of nature, swift, precise, and unrelenting. Elena watched him, awestruck, yet no longer afraid. She released her final arrow, striking the weapon from a man's hand. The remaining soldiers scattered, leaving the town silent and trembling beneath their shadow. When the dust settled, Valkho turned to Elena. His chest heaved slightly from exertion, but his eyes softened as he studied her. You have fought well, he said. Not just with the bow, but with your heart. You are free now, Elena Marrow. Free to live, to choose, to love or not on your own terms. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I never imagined I could feel like this. Alive, strong, wanted for who I am, not for what someone else commands me to be. Valkho stepped closer, the distance between them charged with unspoken emotion. Your heart was never meant to be hidden. I only saw what you refused to see yourself. And now it is yours to give or keep as you wish. Elena looked up into his eyes, dark, unwavering, yet full of something tender she had never expected. She felt the years of fear, isolation, and oppression melt away in the desert wind. Her hand found his, and for the first time she allowed herself to trust completely. I choose you, she whispered. Valkho's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, fierce and protective all at once. And I choose you, he said. Together they walked through the town, the first rays of dawn painting the desert in hues of gold and crimson. No longer prey, no longer bound by fear. They were two souls forged in fire, bound by courage, and awakened to a love that neither had anticipated but both had longed for. Elena glanced at Valkho, her heart lighter than it had ever been. The canyon, the desert, the dangers, they had all led to this moment. The woman who had hidden her heart was now free, and the warrior who had been feared by many had found someone to protect and cherish, not through domination, but through trust. As the sun rose fully over the desert horizon, casting long shadows behind them, Elena Marrow and Valkho Ironcrest stood together, unbroken, untamed, and ready to face whatever the world might throw at them next. In each other they had found freedom, passion, and the courage to embrace life on their own terms. The desert wind carried their laughter, a sound of defiance, love, and new beginnings, for Elena Marrow and Valkho Ironcrest. The journey had ended, and yet, in a way, it had only just begun.